those. I heard a growl. It's so hard not to panic dodge. See that damage? Oh, she's not dead. The damage is just crazy. Like, I feel like this works. Mana Tempest, I feel like people are sleeping on it. Blood Mage is a little bit tricky as a class because the first passive you're forced to take has a pretty big drawback, and none of the other classes have anything quite as debilitating, but I think I've stumbled into some synergies that make it worth it. I've been blasting through the back half of the campaign, absolutely no problem, just decimating content. I'll kind of give you guys an overview of how this thing's working. There's nothing too specific that it requires, no items or anything, so I think you should be able to throw something similar together pretty easily if interested. Let's jump in. Okay, let's start with skills first. Bone Storm is kind of our bread and butter. It's where most of our damage will be coming from. As for the support gems we're running, I'm running Pierce, Scattershot, and Arcane Tempo currently. I substitute in Brutality before I get into boss fights because it does increase our damage, but I've found that Pierce is the easiest one to drop. But when, you know, moving through and clearing, we want Pierce because it makes it faster. Once I get my 4th slot unlocked, I'll pull Brutality up here. When I'm not using it, I stick Brutality on Bone Cage. Bone Cage is kind of a defensive layer. If there's a bunch of trash mobs or stuff that Bone Storm is missing because they're like flying or small, Bone Cage can help us wipe them. As I said, I'm using Brutality on it when it's not on Bone Storm. Otherwise, we're putting Spell Echo on, so it kind of casts twice, and then Execute, so it helps like finish off mobs. It's just stuff to buff the damage of Bone Cage. Let's see. Next, Blasphemy is interesting. It applies a debuff kind of in a curse in a circle around you. It works pretty well. The main thing it's doing is putting vulnerability on the enemies around us to give us a little bit of bonus extra damage there. Magnified Effect makes the circle a little bit bigger, which is handy. I don't think Persistence is actually doing anything, but if it is, it's giving a 40% time increase to vulnerability. But again, I don't think that that's actually working. I just had a slot, so I threw it in there. Grim Feast is a support layer. It gives us shield, so as stuff dies, you can see those little white wisps will appear on the ground, and you can run over them and pick them up, and it'll refill our energy shield. Grim Remnants is what they're called. And because we're running a bunch of minions, which we'll get to in a second, we have like a bunch of these. We don't run a ton of energy shield. That's not something we're focused on, but it, you know, it's an extra layer, gives us a little bit of a damage buffer before we are getting into our life. Profane Ritual is one mechanism we use to generate power charges. Power charges. I don't use it a ton, but it can be used on corpses to kind of fill those up if you want to go into a fight with power charges and you don't have any already. You know, it's just kind of a handy little utility. Same with Mana Tempest. So you guys saw in that early footage, Mana Tempest I've found in boss fights, like when a boss is stunned, this thing just like doubles my damage effectively. I feel like the lightning damage shouldn't be doing that much because none of our passive tree is in lightning, and you'll see that in a second. But I think what the secret is here is in this premeditation support node. I think that this is just making the whole skill deal 15% more damage. So like all of the super buffed up you know, Bone Storm that we're doing from inside this Mana Tempest is just hitting even harder. You do have to be careful with it though, because as it says here, basically what happens is as you stand in the storm, like you're gonna, spells are going, your mana's gonna get drained, and because we're running Blood Mage, that also means your health's gonna get drained, so you gotta watch that. But if you can afford it, again, especially like when a boss is stunned, it's just making my damage go nuts. So again, I think this is like a cool combo that I haven't seen anybody else running. Give that a look for sure. We're also running quite a bit of spirit in this build, so we'll get to gear in a second, but we've got a couple instances of skeletal warrior, one explicit and one implicit from the weapon. This one's got last grasp. We're basically just using these as like shields to try to give mobs and bosses something else to attack. I don't know if it's super necessary, but I've found it handy to have it in there. Then life remnants from the ascendancy. Clarity I've found to be useful. I don't want to sacrifice the spirit I would need to use for anything else, but clarity gives us mana regen. Mana, can be a problem sometimes depending on your gear, so no reason not to run it if you can spare the spirit. This is the other instance of skeletal warriors, the one given to us by our offhand, and we've got meat shield on them. Again, these guys they're not really relying on them for damage at all. They're just there to give enemy mobs something to attack. And then Power Siphon is our left click. So, well, I'm using it on my left click, but it's an interesting skill. It lets you kill enemies that are in culling range. So culling is anything, let me make sure I get this right here. Yeah, culling is anything that is basically close to death, so uniques are 5%, magic are 20%, and normal enemies are 30%. It's kind of fun to click on enemies when they're about to die, but this synergizes really nicely, because when you cull, what this actually does is it gives you a power charge, and those power charges kind of make Bone Storm do more damage. So you saw, like, when I was attacking, those Bone Storm spears would often be like glowing blue. That's because they're empowered by these power charges. So as I said before, Profane Ritual is one way to get them, and then the other way we get them is Power Siphon, and then the third way is from a piece of gear we've got. So let's jump into that next. Okay, so let's talk about gear a little bit now. So there's a few affixes and attributes, I guess, we're just going to want across the board from wherever we can get them. As I said, our wand is giving us Power Siphon to generate those charges I was talking about. It's also giving us spell physical damage, or just spell damage, really anything that just increases that, or like projectile spell damage. Bone Storm is a physical projectile spell, so anything that's giving you damage there is a plus. The other big one here is the +4 level of all physical spell skills. When leveling, the plus levels to Bone Storm is huge. Like, that makes it way more powerful, so look for that there. I also found on the amulet you can get plus levels to projectile skills, so that can help quite a bit. You can get that thing like 5 or 6 levels above where you would typically be, based on your gems, just doing tons and tons of damage. So focus on that. And then, as I said, other than that, you're kind of just looking for damage. As for our defense layer, because of the life remnants ascendancy, you can overheal to double life based on orbs, so every kind of point of life you can get is worth twice as much. So that means strength and plus to life are pretty good. So that's kind of what I've been prioritizing, and it seems to work pretty well. As you rank up, resistances will be important, but initially life is kind of the thing that you should strive for. And on top of that, as part of the ascendancy, there's actually a node in the Blood Mage ascendancy that gives you additional crit chance per amount of life you've got. And crit chance is the other thing that we're looking for here, crit chance and crit damage. So as you're gearing up, you kind of want to skew that way as well. It can be hard to know exactly what should be where, but depending on what you've got, you kind of, just make it work. It doesn't need to be specific. You don't need to hit any specific thresholds to make this build work. There's no magic numbers. Just as your crit chance goes up, the build will kind of start to hum a little bit more. The main reason for that is because our chest piece is this unique. You don't need this unique to make the build work. It works fine without it. But once you have this unique, you have another new way to generate power charges. As you can see here, you get a 25% chance to gain a power charge on critical hit. So now with this, there's a few things that can be happening on critical hits. We're getting the little blood orbs on the ground that let us overheal, and we're getting power charges potentially. So if you look back at that footage, what you'll see is happening is essentially whenever we cast, most of the time we're just getting a power charge back, so we can kind of constantly just keep chaining power charges forever, and that the Bone Storm just keeps hitting, and it'll it's a really nice synergy if you can make this work. It's a little bit of a you're foregoing some other armor and defense layers and stuff. So if you're ever struggling with a boss and you can afford to forego a little bit of damage, you can replace this with a chest piece that's just like armor and health, like as I was saying before, and that might make you a little bit tougher, but you'll lose this like constant refresh of power charges, which this gives you and can be quite nice. There's again no other real uniques you need. I am running these stitch gloves just for the increased spell damage, but again, like nothing's too specific. Finally, for the scepter, I'm just super high spirit to support this kind of skeleton build. You could also go with focus, that's just spell damage if you don't want to run a high spirit variant with like all these skeletons. I just find it handy to like keep minions, spells, and stuff off of me a little bit and give me a little bit of wiggle room, but I think you could increase the damage even further if you just like went Scepter with additional spell damage here. Okay, finally, the passive tree, the interesting bit. So for the ascendancy, we'll start there. We're Blood Mage, so we gotta do Sanguimancy. This is hurting us, all the things that it comes with, but again, we get this kind of overheal with it, or whatever it's called. And eventually it lets us path over here once you've got your second points. So as I said before, spell crit chance, sure, that's great. We like critting, but this gore spike is great. So we get 1% increased damage bonus per 40 life. So as you get more life, this is why I was saying you want to prioritize life, because as you get more life, your crit damage will go up. If that's what we're focusing on, it can be super good. Let's kind of path up from here, and I'll just guide you guys through this in the order that I went through as I was leveling. It's pretty linear. You don't have to do any like crazy refunding stuff as you go. So let's just kind of move up the skill tree from here. I'm going up this way right now, spell and minion damage. You could also go wide here and come in if you need additional attributes for anything. As we're pathing, I'll talk about this more in a second, but really what we're focusing on is getting as much intelligence as you need, and everything else goes to strength, because as I said, like, health is important. The more health we have, the more damage we're doing actually, as long as you're not running out of mana. So health is the thing that we care about, which is cool because we're making ourselves more tanky, and in doing so, we're actually doing more damage. But again, I'm pathing here now. I may change this out later. It's a pain to refund these super low nodes, so keep that in mind. Like you could, once you have a few spare points, you could like go out wide. But for now, we're just going up this tree because we do want these nodes. These are crit hit chance, which we said is good, and spell physical damage. So physical damage is great. It's our Bone Storm and Bone Spear, or whatever, the circle one. That is making those empowered, and you'll kind of see as we go through the tree, that's where we're focusing on. So again, the highway nodes are int and strength. You can pop over here for these increased spell damage right away. I waited on this, so my initial path was basically straight up here. I even skipped these, went up, and got these physical damage bonuses. This gives you break armor, which is super handy eventually to kind of, armor is effectively its own resistance class, and because we're doing all physical damage, we need a way to get through that. So getting armor break is pretty potent for us. Once we have the physical damage broken, then again, like crits and everything becomes our focus. So after I did that, then I passed down this way up this super long highway. These are nice because they're like physical damage and strength nodes, so that's handy. And then out here onto more crit damage. Down here, a little bit of recoup. Recoup's like okay. It comes back in like after a couple seconds. I think it's recovered over 8 seconds. Yeah, so like it's fine. But it's not great. Oh, sorry, I was probably covering this a little bit. But yeah, here, this crit node is where I stop on this part of the chain. And yeah, let's see. Then after that, I think I went down this way, as I said, like a little bit of staying power. And then this is just like there's a ton of good crit synergy in here. It gives us some dex, which is handy. But it's just more crit damage, crit chance. That's really what we're pumping up. After that, I popped down here because I was dying a little bit more. So these guys are just giving us max life and, a way to recover a little bit more life. And then down this path is kind of interesting. So this power within gives us power charges, crit damage if we got a power charge recently. If you're doing any of these methods of power charge generation count, and recently is 4 seconds. So like, if you're killing the bodies, or you're casting the runes on the ground, or you have the chest piece, this thing will be going, giving you 20% additional crit damage, and it's giving you the capacity to have a 4th power charge. And the more power charges you have, the more those spears are going to explode and do additional damage, so that can be pretty handy. Finally, we kind of go down this way. This is just more crit stuff. The Moment of Truth is nice. If you've dealt a non-crit recently, you get it. Because we're not at 100% crit chance, you'll be dealing non-crits. It's really hard to get to 100% crit chance, but you can get pretty close. But I think this is still worth it. Then finally, this gives us extra damage if we have dealt a critical hit recently with Crashing Wave. Then from there, I basically just like went in and filled in some of these little nodes in here. Spell damage on the way to Potent Incantation. More spell damage. Cast speed is also nice for Bone Storm. It is a little bit slow to cast, so pumping that up is handy. And then these are just more crit nodes, crit chance for spells, all that. As for where I'm headed next, so there's a couple options here. I'll be sure to have a build guide in the video description, and I'll be sharing links and stuff in the Discord, so if you want to kind of keep track, that'd be a good place to stay tuned. There'll be a link in the description as well. But yeah, I'm eyeing a couple routes. So one, there's a bunch more physical damage nodes up over here, crit chance and physical damage stuff. So I'm tempted by, but it's a little bit expensive to get to. There's also this triangle, which is a bunch of crit stuff. I may try to head over this way. These are a little bit easier to get to. There's some guaranteed crit stuff down here, which could be kind of nice. But other than that, there's like kind of some other clusters of just like flat crit chance that I might grab. These, like, there's 10% there, there's 15% crit damage bonus, there's like the bottom half of these diamonds here, so I may just end up doing that. It's not super interesting, but it's just increased damage, or we'll see. If I get into endgame and I'm feeling a little bit squishy, maybe we'll kind of skew into some stuff that gives us a little bit more staying power. And then as I get more of the ascendancy points, I think I'm just gonna finish this out. This base crit hit chance for spells is 15%, will be a pretty big buff for us, and just increased crit chance is always nice. If you're having trouble surviving, you could also go this way and give yourself a little bit more buffer here. Life Leech into Vitality Siphon will basically give you a way to leech life, and this Life Leech just makes it better. But I was finding that I was never dropping below my overheal, so I was never actually in the range where my life leech would be doing anything, because it doesn't overheal you, so you'll only ever heal up to your life total. And when running around and killing mobs, I'm just like, when you're critting all the time, that's generating ores which you're picking up, so you're usually above full life. If you go down below it, you're going down pretty quick. So I didn't find much utility here, so I'm kind of going the damage route and trying to find that, defensive layer elsewhere. But yeah, I think that's about it. If you've got any questions or thoughts, please leave a comment. I'm always happy to answer questions. You can catch me live on Twitch, link in the video description. And again, I'll have a link to a build guide that I'm kind of updating over time, and you can stay tuned there as well. So that's it. Thanks for watching. I'll leave you guys with a little bit of gameplay here. Have a good one. Take it easy. This guy's voice actor is kind of sick. Stun him. Does he actually get stunned? Oh yeah, we gotta stand behind her. Whew. Give me those heal orbs. See, he's like invulnerable. We're not doing any damage.
I don't have time for this. Stand to my will. Impede my enemies.
He's stunnable again. So close. Pretty good. I feel like that was quick.